Hey everybody, welcome to the Amateur Otaku Podcast. I am your host, Michael Thomas. Joining me as always is the Isaac Wolff, the Emblem Maniac. We are here discussing My Hero Academia Vigilantes chapters 6 and 7. So if you're not reading along with us for chapters 6 and 7 of Vigilantes, this is your spoiler warning. Also, I know Vigilantes 115 just dropped this weekend. And again, we're reading this in order. So we will get to that point eventually. I know a lot of people were buzzing about that chapter. So we're anticipating getting to that point. But we're still back here in chapter 6 and 7. The first chapter is Holding Back. So, Isaac, last week we were introduced to a new villain. And this week we're kind of following up on that plot line of the queen bee and her trigger bees that she's basically controlling. And in this chapter, Koichi, Pop, and Knuckle Duster are patrolling the streets, and they meet a group of perverts, which leads to probably the funniest funniest panel in the entire My Hero franchise of Koichi basically saying, "Hey, not to fetish shame these three pervs, but we need to figure out how to like basically appease their fetishes so they'd stop swiping women's panties." What the heck was the beginning of this chapter?
Uh, I was just at what?
It was such a weird opening.
It just it it it, it I was just I was legit just it's I wouldn't say that because they have had. I mean, the the main line series has been at, and well, he is their perv, so to speak. So it's not like the series is known to have some form of pervy humor, but this just I dare argue that this came somewhat out of out of nowhere.
Yeah, I
If
mean it's
that
the
makes sense.
beginning of the chapter, so it's like, really? What the heck, man?
So just okay, maybe they want to start easy for the start easy for the readers.
The
So
funniest
go
Yeah,
on.
like the funniest bit to me is that the crawler's quirk is the exact same as these three guys, so the women kind of like jump him and beat him up. That was a legitimately funny moment, but the rest of it's like, what is happening? Especially like the whole panel of like we're wolves, and then we flash our claws and our fangs and blah. It's like, guys, you're not doing anything. Like you're not all for one. You're not overhaul. Get out of here. And then
Yeah,
Knuckle Duster just comes in and beats the crap out of him, which is the main point of this chapter, which is why we're talking about them individually and not as a whole, because they don't really tie together much. Knuckle Duster and Koichi are training, and Koichi and Pop notice that the old man is a little off today, and so they're trying to figure it out. Pop doesn't really seem to like Knuckle Duster anyway, so she's just like, yeah, he's a crazy old man, whatever. But that's something that we're just gonna put a pin in. We kind of flash back to our new villain, and she's talking to her boss, and we don't know who her boss is. I have an idea. I'm not gonna say just in case I'm right.
which you
But
pretty much always are to some so it feels like.
yeah, but like if I turn out to be right, you could easily say, "Hey, you've just read ahead." And I have not. I'm now. This is where I stopped reading. This is the chapter I stopped reading. So you are now caught up to where
Hey,
I am.
hey, you have been right on so many theories on the main storyline, so I would have believed you if it was just a theory.
My theory is that we already know she's pushing trigger. My theory is that she is working with You would think All for One. I'm thinking maybe Overhaul because we already know that that Trigger was a part of the Overhaul storyline. So I feel like that would make sense. Um, Especially like Overhaul already said he's passing out quirk erasers and quirk boosters with Ares. Spoilers for My Hero Academia. Sorry, I don't know if you guys are even caught up on the anime or the manga with that one. But anyway, it could be Overhaul. It could be the Chie Saikai I think she's working with, which might be interesting. Or Overhaul's, was it father who was the head of the Chie Saikai at this time? That's my theory.
I believe so. And
Yeah.
well, you know what they say. It all stings together.
So we see her pushing the trigger, and she basically gives this again another random pop-up villain, as Knuckle Duster would say. She gives him trigger, and his quirk is probably a little more receptive than the other folks we've seen so far because he basically turns into Aaron's attack titan. And so we got Knuckle
I wonder if
Duster
that was
pops that.
deliberate.
It might be. I mean, again, we had Wolverine and Cyclops 2 chapters ago. So we see this guy blow up and he looks like Aaron's Titan from Attack on Titan, which I just think is pretty funny. Knuckle Duster and Koichi fight him off. And then we just see that Knuckle Duster wanted a challenge. He was tired of fighting all these small fry throughout the city, and he needed somebody who can punch him back. This chapter it's one of those villain of the week chapters, which Vigilantes has been doing a lot of here in the beginning. I think as they establish their big bad, we're getting seeds of it. So Isaac, I want your opinion on this small adventure, this one-off really of learning about how the big bad wants to keep getting run with the Vigilantes because he's like, hey, we're getting field data without involving pro heroes. I actually like that these Vigilantes are stepping in. Do you think they're playing into whoever this is, playing into their hand? That way Trigger is perfected by the time it gets to the pro heroes? How do you think it's all starting to come together a little bit?
I can easily see this being the case, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
yeah.
like we said, it all stings together.
It's interesting how we're doing this from the perspective of this Queen Bee character, of how she's just like, hey, I'm just doing what the big guy says, and we see her in a very uncomfortable scene at the end here with an older man as he's here to get his own dose of trigger, I guess. And it's like, how deep does this go? How far does it go? It's something that's going to be revealed because, again, we had Tsukuichi in a chapter beforehand, kind of investigating it. And then the next chapter, we also have some heroes who might be on the trail as well. So, I don't know. This chapter was fine. It's the first one that felt like filler to me. I don't know if you got that impression too.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, I can agree with that part. Especially considering the opening. They ripped up the opening and went full. And they just flashed forward. That's for certain.
Yeah, it was a weird introduction to the chapter. And then again, we fight another one-off, or we assume it's a one-off. Maybe he'll come back later. But I like the moments where we see our trio, right? Our main 3 characters working together. Even if it's just, again, training at Koichi's apartment. I like the 3 of them together. And so I think they play well off of each other. It's just some of this other stuff isn't really gripping me yet. So I'm hoping as we move on, everything around the 3 tightens up. Again, we're only chapter 6 into the story. So they got time to flesh out the rest of the world. My Hero is such a rich universe, such a rich sandbox for them to play in anyway. I feel that making the supporting cast around these 3 is going to be fairly easy. They just need to find their footing.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's not that complicated of a story compared to the mainline saga, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. It's just finding its place alongside that main story. Like digging down into the vigilante side of the universe, carving out what even is the vigilante side of the universe. It's taken a little bit of time, but I am interested to see what we do with these three, especially as we go into the next chapter, which is chapter 7, Runner. This one was really cool to me. Like, I don't know your thoughts on chapter 7, but for me, this is one of the best ones in the series. We see Tensei Ida, Ingenium, the original Ingenium, as he's trying to catch like a speedster villain. And I think it was really cool, him and Koichi's relationship, because the two of them just kind of like meet randomly on a jog as Koichi's trying to figure out how to use his quirk more efficiently. And Tensei gives him pointers on what to do with his power, learning how to stop on a dime essentially with his going in reverse to cut his momentum. Like, I feel like this is the chapter that I really needed after the last two. Kind of just like, yeah, we're in the My Hero world. Let's take advantage of that, right? Let's play around in that sandbox. What were your thoughts on Runner, I guess, and how we introduced Ingenium?
I mean, how should I put it? I sort of, at the end, felt sorry for the guy because he clearly wanted to be officially known as a hero and not a vigilante. Mm-hmm. And then he is getting stuck as a vigilante. But besides that, it's stuff like this that makes me just. This is how you do. It's a prime example of a chapter similar to the first chapters to some extent. That I feel like this is how you do a spin-off. You covered areas that hasn't been covered. Maybe it's back in the past or happened in between some arcs that you a timeline where you haven't covered in some other series or something similar to how Star Wars do to some extent. Even though, I mean, Bad Batch is on there, Rebels is there, and Mandalorian is there. On top of the movies is there and there. It's sort of, I might be a bit burned out on the Star Wars, but I think that is a right approach. That's the approach they should do if they want to do spin-offs and all that. Yes, and I think Vigilantes is a good example of it so far, at least. And with this chapter in particular, that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. Like you said, we had the mainline Skywalker saga, for example, and then you spin off to the Mandalorian or go backwards to the Clone Wars and Rebels. Like, yeah, that's how you keep the brand engaging and fresh without having to keep doing the mainline thing. And I think this chapter really excels because, bless you. But I think this chapter really excels because they take advantage of a character who didn't get any shine in the main series, but we have an emotional connection to Tensei because of his brother Tenya. And we know what happened in that Stain arc where he's crippled and he can no longer be a hero and he passes on the mantle to his brother. And seeing how that affected Ida during that Stain arc, which in my opinion is still like top 2 arcs of the entire story of My Hero Academia, seeing how that like affected Ida, you now get it, right? Like, we already felt for Ida when that happened, but it's like Tensei is the most kind individual. Like, he doesn't even care that Koichi's a vigilante or that he's illegally using his quirk in public. he just sees a person who needs help, so he's gonna like, hey, I can show you how to do this. You should work at my agency if you're interested. And he offers him a hand. I'm like, you clearly want to do this. I'm giving you an avenue to do this officially, do it legally. And I really liked that about this chapter of like, one, it's establishing a character that we're already somewhat familiar with, but it's adding more to the lore of the universe. Two, it's still playing into that villain of the week thing where we have a new villain who has two quirks, I guess. At first he's super fast, but now he can fly. That's something that leads to All for One being around here somewhere. Or the Doctor at the very least. But also I like how now we're introducing struggle into the team, right? Like Knuckle Duster even says, do you want a new master? Do you need a new master? And so it's like we established their dynamic. Now we can introduce problems into their dynamic of Knuckle Duster isn't a great teacher. Like nobody's helped Koichi master his quirk. And one conversation with Tensei, and he's already 1,000 times better than he was yesterday. And so those are the type of things that I think it's good for to last with the characters, to last with Pop and realize like, hey, maybe being official is probably the best way for us to go about this. You know, instead of just going around stopping crimes that they happen to see or patrolling when they really shouldn't be because it's illegal. I think it's introducing, like having Aizawa show up was cool. But like having a hero that's kind of like, yeah, I don't really care if you guys are vigilantes. You guys helped us out in a pinch and we appreciate it. Shows a different side of the equation that we haven't seen until now. Again, only 7 chapters in, but I like you said, we're kind of fleshing out the rest of the My Hero universe and how this character of Ingenium is viewed, how they operate, because you see how big his agency is, how many sidekicks he has around him. I think it's just really well done, especially as a one-off, because you can read this chapter without reading the rest of Vigilantes. It's almost like a secondary pilot. Like you can give this to somebody who's read My Hero Academia and they can instantly catch on to what's happening in this chapter. And I think that works really well, personally. Isaac, are you here?
Oh, I had to mute myself. I totally missed that, but I think you're right on cue, honestly. I really don't know. But just... Okay. Let me sort of ask you this. Is there any character from the My Hero Academia mainline story that you would like to see here and why? Moving forward, that is.
Ooh, okay, so that's interesting because full disclosure, we already know some characters that will show up because reasons. So I'm not going to mention those. But I think Murako might be very interesting to show up in this series. Like some of the other pro heroes we don't know a lot about, like Crust, Murako, Edge Shot, I think is his name. I think those are characters that would be really cool to see pop up in this series, especially since, again, they don't get a ton of screen time in the mainline one because we have our UA kids. But it's like, even compared to My Hero Academia, think about it. The main cast of this series so far is Knuckle Duster, the Crawler, and Popstep. 3 compared to like 23 in the mainline continuity. So I feel like you can get away with, like, again, like having Murako show up, or Bash Genius can show up, especially with this being a prequel. You can have characters like that interact with our main cast. I think that would be really cool. What about you? Do you have anybody in mind that you want to see here?
Honestly, it's the pro heroes that have been given the least screen time in the main series, so they can give. Sure, it's not the main series, but they can get some more spotlight, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Any come to mind? Like Midnight or some
Yeah,
Mentos.
Midnight maybe. I
Mm-hmm.
can't. There's so many that you could add on as the. Yes, they haven't had that much amount of screen time. So it's just a list, if that makes any sense.
What I want is more characters like Ingenium. Like Ingenium was a character that wouldn't have come to mind, but I love that he showed up here, and it feels like he's gonna show up again. Honestly, with the way things are kind of left open ended with he and our vigilantes, their relationship. Also, they just took full advantage of how amazing his costume design is. Something that the main series never really did with Ida. Because, like, dude looks like a freaking Gundam, and it's amazing.
Honestly, that was my first thought when I read the chapter. Also, so it's not just me, huh?
Yeah, like I just loved the interaction, like him basically, like, I'm not gonna say he's the All Might to Koichi's and Zuko, but I like how he's just like a mentor who's there to step in and like, hey, you're doing great. I love how you're going about it, but you can do this better, and I'm always here if you need help, and blah blah blah. It's like I like the nature of the two's relationship, and I also again like how he plays in contrast to Knuckle Duster as a mentor, who's way more rough around the edges, to say the least.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, I'm being very nice to our good man here, Knuckle Duster. I want to know, like, the relationship between Koichi and Pop. It's an interesting one. It's not a romantic relationship, though it does seem like they're becoming friends, which I think is interesting because like she clearly cares about his well-being when he's sparring with Knuckle Duster, which I think is interesting, seeing like how the two of them progress, and even Knuckle Duster, like how he's becoming more of a mentor a little bit to the two of them. I'm just really interested to see how like the character dynamics play out, how they evolve and change, because in the mainline timeline, Deku and All Might's relationship is vastly different now than it was at the beginning of that series. It's still there, and it could still, harken back to elements of that, but Deku is no longer bowing before All Might, right? They're very much equal footing, even though he still sees
Yeah,
him as a teacher.
pretty much that. Yeah, but oh, I lost my train of thought again. Ugh, annoyed by that one. But yeah, it's just like I said before. This is how you should do a spin-off, so to speak, in my book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know you were talking off air a little bit about how Boruto kind of annoyed you, annoyed you. And it's like then you see this, like, yeah, like this is why it works as a spinoff though. It's establishing characters that we're familiar with, but like giving us a new spin on them, or showing us a different side of the My Hero Academia world, which I think is really cool. Especially again, we already know what happens to Tensei. So seeing his smile at the end of this chapter is just a gut punch. And
Yeah,
it's honestly so clever how they did that, because it's like no matter, like, if we never see him again in this series, we already know what happens, and it hurts, it's painful, but if we just keep developing him in this series, that might be even
it will be
worse.
even worse.
Yeah, so it's
Just
really a catch-22 where it's like we're gonna get hit in the feels regardless.
yeah. Do you have anything else to mention about this one?
No, I am through my notes with these two chapters. They were fun. Not like chapter 6 wasn't perfect, but I did like the back end of that chapter where we see more of the mafia or whoever's in charge of this pushing like the trigger drug with Queen Bee. We see the Attack Titan fighting our trio, so that was fun. Chapter 7 again though is a blast. I really enjoyed it, so I don't have much more to add. I'm just excited to see what happens next time.
Same.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you all so much for checking out this episode of My Hero Academia Vigilantes, chapters 6 and 7. We are going to keep going along here, reading chapters 8 and 9, I guess, for next week. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We're also covering the My Hero Academia manga here on the channel. We just did discussion on chapter, was it 337 of the mainline series? A lot of stuff is happening on that front. So if you're caught up on the manga, check that out. If you're not caught up on the manga, we have anime reviews here as well you can check out. So stay tuned for that when the anime comes back, or go to the backlog and listen to some of the ones we did for this past season. Isaac, I know you guys have some stuff coming up here on the channel. Anything you want to let the listeners know about?
My father has heard me and granted me my wish, my revenge. Well, besides that,
jeez.
Well, besides that, we have. We are trying to catch up with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, My Ordinary Life. We're thinking about starting Demon Slayer. We're doing Attack on Titan next year. And might do Jujutsu Kaisen.
Yeah.
So it's a lot going on in the world of anime.
For sure.
That's for sure. Also, you will get to reference later down the line.
Yeah, guys, it's something else. We'll just put it that way. Make sure you follow the podcast at Amateur Otaku Pod. Follow Isaac at Emblemaniac on Twitter. Follow Brandon at the Scarlet Band 52. Leo Rydell at Geekly Goods and Leo_Rydell. I'm Michael Thomas at Novice Cinephile. We will catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for listening. Go beyond. Plus ultra.
Plus ultra.